Tissues in plants and animals. In the last chapter, we have learned that organisms are made up of cells, and the cells are the structural and functional unit of life. Cells being the structural and functional unit of our life, all functions of the body are performed by the cells. Depending on the number of cells, the organisms can be further classified as unicellular, wherein they are made up of just a single cell, like that of an amoeba, or it could be made up of many cells, multicellular, like the examples of plants and animals. These are multicellular organisms made up of millions of cells. So here we have unicellular, which are made up of just single type of cell or one cell, multicellular, which are made up of millions of cells. Now the body has to perform many functions like nutrition, respiration, excretion, and reproduction. All these life processes in unicellular organisms are performed by a single cell. In an amoeba, a single cell performs all these functions. However, in multicellular organisms, since there are a million of cells, these different functions are performed by different cells. Nutrition will be performed by a group of cells, a certain group of cells. When we take up the next function, say respiration, is also performed by a group of cells. So all these functions are performed by a group of cells. So these group of cells are called tissues. So in plants and animals, in multicellular organisms, we have these little groups. There will be one group that will carry on the function of nutrition. Another group of cells will carry on the function of respiration. A third group of cells will carry on the function of excretion. And a fourth group of cells will carry on the function of reproduction. So a tissue can be defined as a group of cells that are similar in structure. They work together to perform a particular function, forms a tissue. In multicellular organisms are made up of many cells. The cells then group together to form tissues. Thus we see in multicellular organisms there is a division of labor. Different groups of cells perform different functions. These group of cells have a common origin. They have similar structure and similar functions, and this is a tissue. So in multicellular organisms, different cells perform different functions. All cells that perform the same functions are grouped together to form a tissue. Here we see division of labor. The functions of the organism is performed by different tissues. Cells specializing in one function are often grouped together in the body. This means that a particular function is carried out by a cluster of cells at a definite place in the body. This increases the efficiency of the body. In the next, we'll see the difference between plant tissue and animal tissue. So the first point of difference is we know plants are stationary and most animals move. Now, why are plants stationary? Plants can prepare their own food by the process of photosynthesis, so they need not move around in search of food. However, animals are unable to prepare their food. They have to move around in search of food. They have to move around in the search of shelter and mate. So hence, we see that most of the animals move while plants are stationary. The second difference is the tissues in plants are mostly dead and supportive. They give mechanical strength or support to the plant to remain erect. While in animals, most of the tissues are living. Because of this, we get into the next reason. In plants, since most of the tissues are dead, they require less energy. Here's another difference between plants and animals. Plants require less energy. Their energy requirements is less, while animals require more energy. Because animals move, they require more energy, and most of their cells are living. Cells that are living consume more energy. Cells that are dead do not consume any energy. And since in plants, most of the cells are dead, plants consume less energy. The next point of difference is about growth. In animals, in plants, the growth is limited to certain regions and less uniform. But when it comes to animals, the growth is not limited to a certain region and is more uniform. Now, why is the growth in plants limited to a certain region? It is because the growth in plants is due to a tissue called the meristematic tissue, and this meristematic tissue is present only in certain regions. So in plants, growth takes place only in certain regions. Growth is said to be localized. But in animals, the growth is throughout the body. The growth is uniform. All the parts of the body grow at the same rate. Now for the next difference is the body organization. In plants it is less complex, while in the animals it is more complex. Less complex is the body structure is not as complex that in the animals. Now for the last difference is plants are autotrophic in their nutrition. What do you mean by autotrophic in nutrition? They prepare their own food by the process of photosynthesis, while animals are unable to prepare their own food and they are heterotrophic in nutrition. To go over the slide again, we saw that plants were stationary because they prepared their own food, animals move, and the tissues in plants are dead and supportive. In animals, the tissues are mostly living. And because they're dead and supportive, the tissues, they require less energy. Dead cells require less energy. And plants also do not move around, so they require less energy. Animals require more energy because most of their cells are living and they move around. The growth is limited to certain regions and less uniform in plants, while the growth is not limited to certain regions. It is general growth and more uniform. In plants, the body organization is less complex, not so complicated as in animals, but in animals, the body organization or the body structure is more complex. Plants are autotrophic, they prepare their own food, and animals are heterotrophic, they're unable to prepare their own food. Then we go ahead and learn the different kinds of plant tissue. The first plant tissue that we're going to learn about is the meristematic tissue. Here is a picture of the meristematic tissue. As you have seen, all the cells are similar. So we say the cells of the meristematic tissues are undifferentiated. They're undifferentiated means they're all similar. The next point is they actively divide. Actively dividing cells. And because they are actively dividing, they divide so quickly, they are responsible for the growth of the plant. They increase the length and the girth or the thickness of the plant. So if you were to define meristematic tissue, you will say meristematic tissue consists of undifferentiated, actively dividing cells. They bring about the increase in length and girth of the plant. Now, girth of the plant is the thickness of the plant. We'll go ahead and learn the structure of meristematic cells. First characteristic is they are very active. They keep dividing. That's the main function of meristematic tissue, is to keep dividing and increase the number of cells. And because they keep dividing, their cytoplasm is very dense and the cell wall is thin. They also have a prominent nucleus, since the nucleus plays a very important role in the division of a cell. They lack vacuoles. They do not have vacuoles because they do not need vacuoles. There is no need for storage. Vacuoles help in storage and rigidity and turgidity of the cells. The meristematic cells do not need to store food, so they do not have vacuoles. So the structure of the cells is they are very active, they have a dense cytoplasm, they have a thin cellulose walls and prominent nucleus, and they lack vacuoles. Depending on the location, the meristematic tissues are divided into three. First, we have the apical meristem, which is present at the apex of the root and the shoot. So here we see it is present at the tip of the root and the shoot. Then we have the intercalary meristem, and this meristematic tissue is present at the internodes, base of the leaves and internodes. You can see here this is the intercalary meristematic tissue, and in the end we have the lateral meristem. The lateral meristem is present along the sides of the stem. It is present almost parallel to the long axis of the stem. Now let's go to the functions of the meristematic tissue. The first one we learned was the apical meristem, and this apical meristem was present at the tip of the root and shoot. This helps to increase the length of the plant. It makes the plant taller. Then we had the intercalary meristem. The intercalary meristem also helps to increase the length of the plant. It is present at the internodes or the base of the leaves. And the last is the lateral meristem. The lateral meristem present at the sides of the plant helps to increase the girth of the plant. The girth means the diameter of the plant. It is also called the cambium. The cambium is lateral meristematic tissue. We learned that the meristematic tissue is made up of cells that actively divide. The cells keep dividing and produce a large number of cells. Now what happens to these meristematic cells? These meristematic cells then take up a function. Some of them become the parenchyma. The others will become into the collenchyma, while others will turn into sclerenchyma. Some will turn into the xylem and phloem. Each of these tissues have a different function. But for the meristematic cells to turn into these different tissues and perform different functions, they need to change their shape and size. So the process by which the meristematic tissues change their shape and size and take up a function is called differentiation. So some of these meristematic tissues will turn into parenchyma, some will become into collenchyma, the rest will turn into sclerenchyma, while some of them will then turn into xylem and phloem. And in order to take up this specific function, they have to change the shape and size, and this process is called differentiation. So let's go ahead and define differentiation. So the process of taking up a permanent shape, size and function by cells of the meristematic tissue is called differentiation. So the meristematic cells, they undergo this process of differentiation. They become different from one another and they form a tissue now called the permanent tissue. They are no longer called meristematic, but they are called the permanent tissue. And as we have seen, we have different kinds of permanent tissue. We have the parenchyma, the collenchyma, and the sclerenchyma, the xylem and the phloem. All these are called the permanent tissues. The parenchyma, collenchyma, and sclerenchyma are called the simple tissue because they are all made of the same type of cells, one type of cells. However, the xylem and the phloem. They are made up of different types of cells, like the tracheids, the vessels, the companion cells, and hence they are called the complex tissue. Difference between meristematic and permanent tissue. The first difference is the meristematic tissues are capable of actively dividing. They keep dividing and producing large number of cells. Permanent have lost the capability to divide. They are unable to divide anymore. The next difference is the meristematic tissues are undifferentiated cells. All the cells are similar in structure. However, the permanent tissues, the cells are differentiated and perform different functions, as we will see further, the different types of permanent tissues. Now, in meristematic, all cells are living. Permanent, the cells may be living or they may be dead. In meristematic, the cells have no vacuoles, or if they have vacuoles, they are very small. But the permanent tissues have large vacuoles. And when it comes to cytoplasm, the meristematic have a dense cytoplasm, while the permanent, the cytoplasm is less dense. These differences between the meristematic and the permanent tissue. The next thing we need to learn is simple tissues. Simple tissues are tissues that are made up of same type of cells. Example, we have the parenchyma, which is all the cells are of the same type. Then we have the collenchyma, made up of same type of cells, and the sclerenchyma. So these are simple tissues because they're all made up of same type of cells. Then we have the permanent tissue, which is made up of different types of cells. And examples of permanent tissues are the xylem and the phloem, which we learn more in detail. The xylem and phloem are made up of different types of cells. Hence, they're called permanent. There's a correction I need to make. This is not permanent tissue. This is complex tissue. Complex tissues are made up of different types of cells, like the xylem, phloem. The xylem is made up of different cells. The phloem also is made up of different types of cells that we will learn later.